Hello and welcome. Here's what's happening right now. Counting down to a crucial meeting at the White House.
I'm not sure what he wants to see me about, but I guess he wants to make a deal.
The scenarios that could unfold in the Oval Office.
What element of the cost of production are you putting a tariff on? It's nonsensical.
The high-profile industry now in the crosshairs of Trump's tariffs. Plus, an ally's heartwarming appreciation for Canadian heroes.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
I'm Heather Butts in for Sandy tonight. Prime Minister Mark Carney has just landed in Washington in preparation for his high-stakes meeting with Donald Trump tomorrow. Both countries say trade and security will be on the agenda. And just what happens in the Oval Office could set the tone for the relationship moving forward. CTV's Mike LeCouture is traveling with the Prime Minister today, and there's a lot riding on this encounter. Mike.
Well, Heather, Prime Minister Mark Carney says his expectation is that these will be difficult yet constructive discussions with U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, one senior source tells CTV News they will be prepared for any scenario. A clear reference to how Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was berated in the Oval Office 2 months ago. Now, a number of ministers are accompanying Carney to D.C., including Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, and the Minister of International Trade Dominic LeBlanc. That delegation will also have meetings tonight with Canadian and American business leaders ahead of that big meeting with Trump tomorrow. Carney has already said he hopes to build on that first phone call with Trump last week. One source says not to expect white smoke when the meetings are over, a reference to the papal conclave being held later this week in Rome. Now, this is the first face-to-face meeting of these two leaders in their current roles, and the Canadian side is clearly trying to manage expectations. But talk of Canada's sovereignty continues to hang over these discussions. While Carney has said becoming the 51st state is out of the question, annexing Canada did come up again in an interview that Trump did with NBC's Meet the Press. Carney has said he wants to address the broader relationship between the two countries, but also the punishing tariffs that have been imposed on Canada by the U.S. Those levies continue to affect Canadian business, and removing them remains a top priority. Now, Carney's entire election campaign was based on him being the best person to deal with Trump and his threats. So there's a lot riding on this meeting. Heather?
Mike LeCouture traveling with the Prime Minister. Thanks, Mike. Mark Carney is hardly the first foreign leader to visit the White House since Donald Trump's re-election, and each previous encounter offers some insight or cautionary tale for Canada's Prime Minister. Carney will be juggling dual priorities, finding common ground with Trump while defending Canadian sovereignty. CTV's Abigail Beeman is in Ottawa now on the careful balancing act. Abigail.
Heather, a lot is riding on this first in-person meeting between Prime Minister and President, with the question of how to earn unpredictable President Trump's respect, one of the most difficult of all.
Disrespectful to the country, this country, that's back to you, far more than...
This disastrous meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stands out as the most public dressing down in the Oval Office.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting?
But the flurry of February meetings with world leaders may hold clues for Prime Minister Mark Carney.
It's a great honor to have you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I say thank you for your hospitality?
Thank you, Mr. President.
French President Emmanuel Macron chose to fact-check.
They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total default.
While UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer chose flattery, armed with an invitation from the King.
This is truly historic. An unprecedented second state visit. He wants to talk that through with you.
And that says at Windsor. That's really something.
A win would be that he doesn't look like Zelensky or Keir Starmer.
Political watchers say Carney needs to ride a fine line while standing up for Canada.
All business, no crazy. Don't turn this into some kind of confrontation. As satisfying as it might be to stand in the Oval Office and, give the gears to the President of the United States, that's not going to serve our national self-interest.
The Prime Minister will be very straightforward.
Senator Peter Beam was the G7 G7 Sherpa in Charlevoix in 2018 when Trump took aim at then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He says Carney's CV and the fact phone calls between Carney and Trump seem to have gone well are helpful factors in the relationship.
He will want to, I think, be forthright and to demonstrate to the president that the president can talk to him. And he's going to give him the straight goods as to how he sees the economy and how he sees the trade partnership.
All eyes on tomorrow's meeting, but it's the first of a few potential face-to-face opportunities Carney may have with Trump. There's a NATO summit next month in The Hague, and then Canada hosts the G7 in Alberta next month as well. Heather?
Abigail Beeman in Ottawa. So we heard what Canada is hoping to achieve during the big face-to-face, but what about the American expectations? Let's bring in CTV's Washington Bureau Chief, Joy Malvin. Joy, are Americans watching as closely as we are?
Heather, there's no fanfare, no flags or big preparations happening over at the White House. Barely a mention on cable TV news. The president, one of his big announcements today, he wants to reopen Alcatraz, the historic prison home to gangsters like Al Capone. And the 2027 NFL draft will be held here in D.C. Roger Goodell thanked Trump for his Canadian trade deal. No, not a new one, but from the president's first term, allowing the NFL to sell local ads on the Canadian feed at the Super Bowl. Now, they've learned, like many, the art of the deal requires praise, flattery. After declaring a trade war with the world, Trump is now under pressure to show progress. He's looking for a win, but he seemed to downplay Prime Minister Carney's visit tomorrow. Take a listen.
He's coming to see me. I'm not sure what he wants to see me about, but I guess he wants to make a deal. Everybody does. They all want to make a deal because we have something that they all want.
Heather, the president's trade war is starting to bite here, and Trump needs a reset with several countries, including Canada, one of its largest trading partners. And after boasting that he could make hundreds of deals so far, not one has been signed. Heather?
Okay, we'll be watching closely. Our Washington Bureau Chief, Joy Malvin. Thanks, Joy. Personalities could certainly come into play at this meeting. As you've seen, we have full team coverage capturing all the angles. CTV's Sandy Ronaldo joins us from Washington. Sandy, what will you be watching for?
Well, Heather, the meeting between Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump will be their first face-to-face ever. But the big question is, which version of Donald Trump will Mark Carney get tomorrow? There's been a lot of mixed messaging recently. On the one hand, a few days ago, Trump said Carney was, quote, a very fine gentleman, which suggested a willingness to work together to resolve the long simmering trade tensions between the two countries. But then, late last night, Trump ordered a 100% tariff on foreign-made movies, which would crush production in Canada, especially Vancouver and Toronto. And also last night on U.S. television, Trump once again invoked the idea of Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state. So it's hard to tell which side of Donald Trump will emerge tomorrow. And of course, that's part of his strategy. But the one thing I'll be watching for, among many things, of course, is his body language and how the two leaders will interact. Will it be cordial? Will it be competitive? Will there be jokes between them? Will Trump repeat his threat of making Canada the 51st state while he's hosting the Prime Minister? Will both sides, and this is key, be able to walk away with a win, or will there be a surprise confrontation as we saw when the Ukrainian president met with Donald Trump? I want to remind our audience that it was back in 1961 when John F. Kennedy was President of the United States, and he spoke to Canada's Parliament. At the time, he said that history has made our countries friends. Economics, partnership, and necessity have made us allies. All of that is going to be tested right now, Heather, and what happens tomorrow in this very high-stakes meeting will certainly determine what lies ahead. Now, we will have full coverage here from Washington at 5:30 on CTV National News. Later, Power Play with Vashi Kapelas will also be in Washington. And be sure to catch CTV National News with Omar Sachedina at 11. Omar will be here as well. Back to you, Heather.
All right, Sandy, thank you. And as Sandy mentioned, Donald Trump's trade war shifted to the silver screen with a post on Truth Social, attacking tariffs on movies made outside the U.S. CTV's Rahim Ladani is looking into the impact that would have on the Canadian film industry. Rahim.
Heather, the White House is now clarifying Donald Trump's comments, saying no final decision on foreign film tariffs had been made. However, the threat of disrupting billions of dollars in the Canadian economy is being described as a direct assault on the film industry. Just like the Incredible Hulk smashing through Knox College in Toronto, Canada has been the stage for blockbuster sensations for decades. But the curtain may be closing on Hollywood North, with U.S. President Donald Trump ordering 100% tariffs on all movies produced outside the United States.
It's nonsense. I mean, it's hard to understand what he means. Lots of films are produced outside the U.S., but about 80% of studio movies are produced inside.
In a late-night post on Truth Social, Trump described the situation as a national security threat. A recent survey of studio executives revealed the United States outside their top 5 of preferred production locations, while Vancouver, Britain, and Toronto were the top 3.
Other nations have been stealing the movies, the movie-making capabilities from the United States. I've done some very strong research over the last week, and we're making very few movies now.
One potential reason for that is the significant tax incentives offered by international governments, seen as a mutually beneficial partnership. In 2023, there were 400 film and television productions in Ontario. They created more than 25,000 jobs and spurred $1.8 billion in economic activity.
Hopefully this will be raised by President Trump and our new Prime Minister, and then we could get to the bottom of it so the industry itself doesn't get hurt.
Just like cars, different parts of the same movie are often produced in the United States and in other countries. It's unclear how that tariff would be calculated, and the uncertainty could cost the movie industry at the box office.
Very likely what will happen here is you'll get retaliatory tariffs against the U.S., making American films impractical to play overseas and around the rest of the world, which, of course, as we all know, is where a good chunk of the money comes from these days.
Ontario's Economic Development Minister says the province is once again ready to suit up, head back to Washington, and fight the tariff. Heather.
Rahim Ladani in Toronto. Thank you, Rahim. Donald Trump says he is also directing the Bureau of Prisons to rebuild and reopen the infamous former prison Alcatraz. Now, one of San Francisco's most popular tourist attractions, the prison housed notorious criminals such as Al Capone before closing in 1963. Trump says a rebuilt Alcatraz will house America's most ruthless and violent offenders. A spokesperson for California's governor dismissed the announcement as a distraction from other issues facing the White House. The Conservative caucus is looking to plan a path forward following last week's election result. The party was able to expand the popular vote, but Pierre Poilievre lost his seat. The question now is, will he be able to stay on as leader? CTV's Judy Trin is looking at that for us tonight. Judy.
Heather, tomorrow morning, the Conservative caucus will meet in Ottawa to choose an interim leader and decide whether they will trigger a leadership review. Meanwhile, Pierre Poilievre is shoring up support in rural Alberta. Photos posted to social media show Pierre Poilievre meeting with Conservative MP Damien Carrick and his constituents. Carrick is stepping aside so Poilievre can run in the riding of Battle River Crowfoot. Poilievre said on X that people in these communities feed and power our country. It'll be an honor to work for their support. After losing his seat in an Ottawa riding, Poilievre will have to convince his 143-member caucus they should keep him on as leader. Right now, there's wide support behind Poilievre, but some analysts say MPs should vote to trigger a leadership review to hold party leaders accountable.
I think it's really, really important for parties to start invoking the Reform Act, regardless of whether they're in government, regardless of whether they won or lost the last election. This is a piece of legislation that allows MPs to take some power back from party leaders.
We are also getting a better sense of how much a by-election will cost once it's called. There are more than 85,000 people registered to vote in Battle River Crowfoot, which is spread out over a large geographic area. According to Elections Canada, the cost of a by-election is about $60 $16.21 a voter. That means the bill for a new round of votes will hit at least $1.38 million. The earliest a by-election can be called is later this summer. That means it's unlikely we'll see Pierre Poilievre in the House of Commons until the fall sitting of Parliament. Heather.
Judy Trin in Ottawa. Coming up, at the trial of former Canadian junior hockey players, the accuser shares her account. What the court heard about the night in question. The prosecution wrapped up its questioning of a woman today at the center of a sexual assault trial involving 5 former members of Canada's World Junior Hockey team. The court in London, Ontario, heard more of her testimony about the night in question back in June 2018, and we want to warn you, the details are graphic. CTV's John Vanavalley-Rao was in the court. John, what are we learning today?
Heather, the complainant took to the stand for a second day as she described in detail feeling drunk, numb, and demeaned. As the accused arrived one by one outside the courthouse, they were met by protesters there in support of the complainant, known only as EM, who inside testified further about what happened after she met several members of the 2018 World Junior Hockey team at a London bar. She says she'd consumed about a dozen drinks that night and went back to this hotel with player Michael McLeod, where they had consensual sex. But she says afterwards he got up and started texting. I just assumed that I'd be staying there for the night, maybe just the two of us, said EM. But she says other men entered the room and says they placed a bed sheet on the floor and told her to lie on it. She says some of them made a sexual comment about golf clubs. It felt really uncomfortable. I was already naked and drunk and feeling really vulnerable. She says 3 men pulled down their pants and obtained oral sex, adding there was shouting and the men encouraged each other. I didn't know these men at all. I didn't know how they'd react if I did try to say no or try to leave. It seemed like the only safe thing to do was just give them what they were wanting. She told the jury a few times she started to get dressed and tried to leave in tears. She testified that's when a man would approach me and try to convince me this was all fun and that it was fine. She says a player followed her into the bathroom and had sex with her, adding she felt she didn't have control over it. The court was shown a pair of cell phone videos, including one in which EM broadly consents to the activity, but testified she just wanted to get out of there.
You can't consent, when you are scared, when you're afraid, maybe when you're intoxicated. And so we have to remember those types of things.
These 5 former players from the junior team have all pleaded not guilty to sex assault, while McLeod has also pleaded not guilty to being a party to the offense. The jury was also shown images of a text exchange the next day in which McLeod asked if she went to the police. Under cross-examination, EM said her mom initially contacted police while her mom's boyfriend contacted Hockey Canada. Her testimony continues tomorrow. Heather.
John Vanavalley-Rao outside the court in London, Ontario. A wildfire near Grand Prairie, Alberta is forcing residents from their homes. The province is telling everyone living in the southern part of the town to get out immediately. Grand Prairie has a population of about 65,000 people. Hopeful news, though, for residents. The fire is now 90% contained. CTV National News will be back in a moment. The search continues for 2 young children in Nova Scotia. 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack were reported missing last Friday. The RCMP says there is no evidence to suggest they were abducted, and it appears the children wandered away from home. Multiple agencies are helping with the search in the air and on the ground. Communities across the country are marking the 15th anniversary of Red Dress Day. A ceremony in Sudbury was one of many, drawing attention to the ongoing crisis of missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit Plus people. A Métis artist inspired the movement where red dresses represent the loss of loved ones. The latest numbers show the homicide rate among Indigenous women is 6 times higher than non-Indigenous women. After the break, Canada's liberating contributions remembered. The utmost appreciation for those who paid the ultimate price. Today is Liberation Day in the Netherlands, and this year marks the 80th anniversary. Canadians played a central role in ending the war. Their contribution on the battlefield came at a very steep price, and the Dutch haven't forgotten. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson is in the Netherlands. Andrew, how were Canadian veterans honored today?
Heather, I'm in Wageningen, the starting point of today's celebration on Liberation Day in the Netherlands, and this is a very historic spot. Inside the hotel behind me, 80 years ago today, a Canadian general was inside negotiating with German generals and secured their surrender to end the 5-year Nazi occupation of the Netherlands in the dying days of the Second World War. The Canadian contribution in that way and soldiers' contributions on the battlefield are being celebrated here this weekend when surviving Canadian veterans who are here today have received an incredible reception.
To the Dutch, they are conquering heroes, even 80 years later.
One photo, please.
101-year-old General Richard Romer was then a 21-year-old Canadian fighter pilot, part of the final push to free Holland from Hitler's grasp. Today, he's soaking in the gratitude. Time has not diminished.
I was thrilled by it, just delighted, because they were there for Canada, because they love Canada, and Canada was the main country involved in liberating them.
It was one of Canada's greatest moments of the war, but close to 8,000 Canadians sacrificed their lives, which is why Romer
Good afternoon.
And the 24 other Canadian veterans in the Dutch Freedom Parade are being received with so much respect. Yesterday, in a powerful moment, poppies were dropped from the sky at a Canadian war cemetery as Dutch children said each soldier's name out loud and placed 2 roses on each grave. It's been a reception the Governor General says is emotional to take in.
Both an inspirational and a bit of sadness and hope. There's hope. You know, people have fought for our freedom, and this is just an indication that we will never forget that. Our freedom came at a very big price.
It has been quite a weekend for these surviving veterans. They will now return to Canada feeling the love of an entire nation, and they can be assured that future generations will continue to be taught the importance of the Canadian sacrifice. Heather?
Andrew, thank you. Their contributions will never be forgotten. That is our newscast. Thank you for joining us. I will be here tonight with CTV National News at 11 for ongoing coverage of Canada's top stories. Tune into CTV News Channel. I'm Heather Butts. Your local CTV News starts right now.